morning, boys and girls, and welcome back to my classroom. I am Mrs. Owens, and I am here at Sequoyah Elementary, and I am so excited to have you back again this week. I hope that you are having a wonderful day. All right, so today we're going to have some fun with science and social studies. And so last week, I talked to you about a young lady and her primary source that she created in a diary. We talked about Anne Frank and how she used that diary to write down all of her thoughts. And then later, millions of people all over the world have read that diary and learned so much about that period of time. So today we're going to talk about different types of primary sources. We're going to move forward in time just a little bit, and we're going to be talking about the 1950s and the 1960s today. I'm going to introduce you to some different women today that played a pivotal role in American history. And so today I'm going to show you a couple of primary sources that you may or may not recognize. And I want you to really think about what they could be and how they might have been used during that time. So the first one I have for you today is this black circle. Do you see this? It is a flat black circle. It has a hole in the middle. It has a little sticker label on it with some writing. And it has some ridges on both sides. It's a hard black plastic. It's kind of shiny, okay? So I want you to be really thinking about what could this be and how could it be used. I'm not going to tell you until the end of the episode today, but I want you to be thinking about that the whole time, and maybe you know what it is. Maybe you don't. Maybe you'll learn something new today. So I want you to be thinking about that. My second primary source we're going to be looking at today is this one right here next to me. It's kind of heavy, so I'm not going to pick it up much, but I want you to be looking at this, and I'll kind of tilt it so you can see really well. It has this piece that comes off with this long coil of a cord, okay? It's got some holes in both of these pieces. It's kind of heavy. It's black in color. It's got some buttons here. On the front, it has these little holes. It has numbers. Some of the numbers are kind of worn off because this one really is an old, both of them are really from the 50s and 60s. So this one that I showed you earlier is from 1957. And this one, I'm not even sure the year on it because I couldn't find a date on it, but it's pretty old. So it has some holes here, and if I put my finger in these holes, I can kind of spin this, and then it goes back to where it was. So I'm not really sure. I want you to be thinking, what could that be for? It only has numbers 1 to 0, and so you kind of spin around, and then they return to where they were. So we need to be thinking about what could that be for, and how might it have been used in the 1950s and the 1960s. And even the chair that I'm sitting on is actually a primary source as well. And so this kind of goes with this device here. So I'm going to tell you more about that at the end, but you're going to have to wait and see. All right, so today we're going to be talking about 4 women that played a huge role in space exploration in America. And so I'm going to introduce you to a few vocabulary words that you might not be familiar with before we read this book. All right, so our first vocabulary word today is segregation. Can you say that? Segregation. It's kind of a long word. So that is the practice or policy of keeping people apart based on their race or their religion or some other reason. Today, for the purpose of this book, we're going to be talking about segregation based on race. So just based on someone's color of their skin, they were made to keep separate. And so that word, again, is segregation. All right, our next word we're going to be learning about today is engineer. Anybody heard of an engineer? Can you say that word, engineer? All right, that's a person who designs and builds machines. Today we're going to be talking about airplanes and spacecraft. And so those are often engineers when they design those, when they work on those, and when they make them. And so an engineer is an important person. Then we're going to talk about aeronautics. Aeronautics, that's another big word. Can you say aeronautics? That's the study of flying. We're going to be talking about space and flying of airplanes today, and that all involves aeronautics. And then our last word that you might not be familiar with is trajectory. Can you say that? That's a really hard word, trajectory. That is the curved path along which something moves through air or space. So trajectory, if you think about throwing a ball, the path that the ball takes as it falls back down to the ground down. That's victory. So that's a really tricky word. So today I'm going to read you a book, and while I'm reading, if you hear one of those 4 vocabulary words, I want you to put your finger on your nose. And maybe that will help you remember, oh yeah, Mrs. Owens already told me what that word means. It will help you with your vocabulary, and maybe you could even use those words when you're talking with your family about the story. All right, so the story we're going to be talking about today is called Hidden Figures. And some of you may have heard of Hidden Figures, or maybe you've even seen, they've made a movie about these ladies. They are so, so neat, and they did so many cool things. So, Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden were good at math. Really good. In 1943, the United States was at war, World War II. That's what we talked about last week. Dorothy Vaughan wanted to serve her country by working for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Oh, there's that word. The government agency that designed airplanes. Having the best airplanes would help America win the war. Making airplanes fly faster and higher and safer meant doing lots of tests at the agency's Langley Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia. Tests meant numbers meant math, and math meant computers. Now, when I say computers, what do you think of? Like a laptop or something with a keyboard? Not the same in the 50s and 60s. Today we think of computers as machines, but in the 1940s, computers were actually people like Dorothy, Mary, Katherine, and Christine. Their job was to do math, and so they called them computers because they would compute numbers. Because Dorothy was black and a woman, some people thought that it would be impossible for her to get a job as a computer. She lived in Virginia, which was a southern state where laws segregated or kept apart black people and white people. Did you hear a vocabulary word? Segregated. That meant that they could not eat in the same restaurants, they could not drink from the same fountains, they could not use the same restrooms, they could not attend the same schools, they could not play on the same sports teams, they could not sit near each other in movie theaters, they couldn't even marry someone of a different race. But Dorothy didn't think it was impossible. She was good at math, really good. Are some of you really good at math? So she knew she was the right person for the job. She applied, and the laboratory offered her a position as a computer. So she was offered the job. At work, blacks and whites were kept apart. The white computers worked in one building, and Dorothy and the other black computers worked in a different building in their separate office. Even though they worked on the same kinds of assignments, the black computers and the white computers used separate bathrooms, and they ate in separate lunchrooms. America won the war in 1945, but Dorothy stayed on the job, still trying to make airplanes faster and safer. By 1951, the Americans and the Russians were competing to see who could build the best planes. That meant more experiments and more numbers. Lots and lots of numbers. And more numbers meant the need for more computers. That's when Mary Jackson got a job as a computer at Langley. She worked in a group that tested model airplanes in wind tunnels. A wind tunnel was a machine like a huge metal box with a powerful fan attached. Mary put model airplanes in the wind tunnel and blasted them with air from the fan. This experiment helped her group improve their designs on the models before building full-sized airplanes. Mary wanted to become an engineer, but officials said it was impossible. Most of the engineers at the laboratory were men. And to become an engineer, Mary needed to take high-level math classes. But she wasn't allowed to go inside the white school where the classes were taught. But Mary was good at math, really good. And she refused to give up. She got permission to enter the school building and take the math classes. And she earned good grades because she didn't give up. Mary Jackson became the first African-American female engineer at the laboratory. Katherine Johnson was good at math and always asked lots of questions. In 1953, she applied to the laboratory for a computer job and was placed on a team that tested actual planes while they were flying in the air. Their research was used to figure out ways to prevent future plane crashes. In one of her first projects, she learned how to analyze turbulence, or dangerous gusts of air. No one knows how many lives her work may have helped save. Pretty important ladies. Katherine wanted to help the group prepare its research reports, so she asked if she could go to meetings with the other experts on her team. Her boss told her it was impossible. Women aren't allowed to attend meetings, he said. But Katherine knew she was good at math as anyone else, maybe even better. So she asked again, and again, and again. Katherine asked her boss so many times, he finally invited her to the meetings. Katherine was good at math, really good. And because she fought to be treated the same as the men, she became the first woman in her group to sign her name to one of the group's reports. In the 1950s, the Langley Laboratory bought a machine computer. Now notice this computer is a little different than the computers you might use at home or at school. This one takes up a whole room. It was huge, just for adding numbers and calculating numbers. At first, these machines made mistakes. Dorothy learned how to program the machines so that they got the right answers. She taught the women in her group how to program the computers, too. In 1957, Russia launched a satellite known as Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. The United States started building satellites to explore space, too. For years, the laboratory had used math to design the airplanes. Now it would need math to create spaceships as well. The government decided to change the agency's name from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, what we know today as NASA. So these ladies were working for NASA. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy told Congress, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon. But the first step to getting a man on the moon was to send an astronaut around the Earth." NASA was going to need to hire more space experts and more people who were good at math. Really good. Can you think of some people we've already met? The people at the laboratory had to work together from morning to night to figure out how to send astronaut John Glenn into space and bring him back home to Earth safely. Katherine Johnson knew she could use math to help. "Tell me where you want his spaceship to land, and I'll tell you where to launch it," Katherine told her boss. Katherine helped calculate the trajectories, there's one of those words we talked about, or pathways that rockets traveled through space. She had to plan Glenn's exact route from takeoff in Florida to splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean. There was no room for error. So he would go up, and he would travel around the Earth, and then he would drop back down and land in the ocean, and someone would go out and get him. So no one was better than Katherine at solving these tricky math problems. Days before his mission, John Glenn wanted Katherine to double-check the machine computer's trajectory calculations to make sure it hadn't made any mistakes. When Katherine said the numbers were correct, Glenn was ready to go. February 20th, 1962, Glenn blasted off into space, circled the Earth, and made his way home safely. Meanwhile, laws began to change so that black and white students could go to school together. Blacks fought for the right to sit beside whites on buses and to drink from the same water fountains. At the laboratory, black and white computers started working together in the same offices, eating at the same lunch tables, and using the same restrooms. Black and white moviegoers could now sit next to each other in the same theater. Across the country, people started to think about ways to bring equality to all Americans. Christine Darden, the fourth lady we're going to talk about, was good at math, and she loved electronic computers. She started working at Langley in 1967. Christine wanted to become an engineer. And thanks to Dorothy, Mary, and Catherine, she knew it was possible. Eventually, she became an engineer for supersonic airplanes. Do you know what supersonic means? It means planes that fly faster than the speed of sound. But her first job was to help with NASA's mission to the moon. The people at the laboratory prepared for years to send astronauts to the moon, about 238,900 miles away from the Earth. Finally, on July 20th, 1969, the world watched as 3 men arrived at the moon in their Apollo 11 spacecraft. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, said astronaut Neil Armstrong when he stepped onto the dusty surface. But it was also a giant leap for Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, Christine, and all the other computers and engineers who had worked at the laboratory over the years. The moon landing was a success from takeoff to splashdown. But there was no time to rest. Once NASA landed astronauts on the moon, the people at the laboratory began dreaming of sending humans to other planets, such as Mars or Jupiter or Saturn. They started to imagine hyper-fast space planes that could travel around the Earth at 7 times the speed of sound. The next adventures wouldn't be easy and would require lots of tests and lots more numbers. But Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, and Christine knew one thing: with hard work, perseverance, and a love of math, anything was possible. So that is a true story about those 4 ladies and what an impact they have had on our country and on our science world and even in the social studies realm, our history. So today, I'm going to show you a fun experiment that you could try at home, creating your own rocket. So the materials you're going to need today is some string. You're going to need some tape, just some Scotch tape. You're going to need a straw, just a plastic drinking straw, and you're going to need a balloon. Any size balloon or color, it doesn't matter. Some optional materials, you could get some construction paper and try to decorate your rocket to make it look more like a rocket. Today I'm just going to use the balloon and straw plain just to show you how to do it. So the first thing you need is you're going to tape your string down onto something. Okay, so today for this purpose I'm going to use a chair, and then I have another a tripod essentially that will show you how high we can get the airplane to travel. Is that good? Hopefully that will work. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your string, and mine is just like a curling ribbon like you would put on a present, but it doesn't really matter. Any kind of string will work. So you're going to take your string and you're going to tape it down to one object in your house. It could be a chair or the floor. And so what you're going to do is, let me turn this off for a minute so you can see everything better. So it's not in my eyes. So you're going to take your string and you're going to tape it down on the chair or whatever you're choosing to put it down on. And then I'm going to unwind it. And cut off my, oops. I'm going to cut off the string. Now, you're going to put your straw on the string before attaching the other side. So I'm going to feed my string through the straw, push the straw through. Now I'm going to take the other side of my string and I'm going to attach it to either another chair or something else. I'm going to do this first time. I'm just going to do it flat across there. My angle it just a little bit. So tape it down. Now I just have my straw attached to my string. Now the last thing you're going to need is some more tape and a balloon. So I have some masking tape here just because I only me here. If you've got someone else to help you hold the tape and your balloon, it might be helpful. So I'm going to put my tape right there. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to inflate your balloon, but you're not going to tie it. You're going to hold it closed, but don't tie it. So here we go. Now, you can inflate the balloon as much or as little as you want, and that's something you can use to experiment with, is to see if that makes a difference on whether or not your rocket works. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the balloon, I'm going to attach it to the bottom underneath my straw, and I'm going to tape it on the top. Okay? So now, at this point, if you wanted to decorate your straw and make it look like a rocket, you could add a point to the front, maybe some tail fins in the back, something to make it look more rocket-like you could. Now, this is also a fun activity you could do if you have siblings at home or your parents. You could set up more than one of this, and you could race each other with your rockets. All right, so I have not tied this. I'm just holding it shut. So as I let go, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that it's just going to stay here, or do you think it's going to move along my line? Let's find out. So I need a good rocket countdown. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, blast off. And you saw how far it traveled. All right, so you could do this same experiment lots of ways. For example, if I were to take my string, and if I move it up to the top of my little pole I have here, and tape it again, put this back down, do you think it would work this way? Let's find out. So I'm going to blow up my balloon again. I'm just using the same balloon over and over. You can get different balloons, or you can try different sizes, different colors, see if it makes a difference. Once again, I don't tie it. I just pinch the end of it, put it underneath my straw, tape the top down, like so. Make sure it's going to stay. And then I'm going to watch and see if I let go of my balloon, what's going to happen. What do you think? So if you can give me a countdown, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, blast off. And you can see how far it went. So you can do this even up to the ceiling. Just see how far you can get it to travel in different distances. And when trying this, you can try blowing it up just a little bit, blowing it up a lot. See if that makes a difference for you and your family, and see who can get theirs to go the fastest. You could have races to see whose balloon rocket travels the fastest, or how far you can get it to go. It's just something fun to try at home, and it's a really cool thing, and that's how rockets work. We call that thrust. When you let go of that balloon, the air that comes shooting out of it causes it to go up the line, and that's called thrust, and that's how a rocket works as well. Rocket takeoff video, you've seen all of the smoke and the fire coming out of the bottom of the rocket, and that's causing thrust, which then shoots the rocket up into space. All right, so a couple things before I leave you today. First of all, I would love to see if you create a rocket of your own. I created a Facebook group where you could post pictures, or maybe you made a diary, or you made a time capsule last week with my lesson. If you did, I'd love to see a picture, and you could share it. So if you go to Facebook and type in Mrs. Owens's RSU Showcase, make sure you have Owens with the apostrophe S on the end, since I'm just one person. That's how it's spelled. And so you can look that up and join that group, and that will allow you to post pictures. And I would love to see if you and your family had the rocket experiment with the balloons. I'd love to see what you do. And it's a great place if you're a Sequoyah student, or even if you're a student somewhere else, you could still join the group and post your pictures there. All right, before I leave you today, though, I need to tell you about our primary sources from this morning. So I asked you what you thought these primary sources might be. So if I return to this one, does anybody know what this source is? Anybody used one of these at home? These are really popular in the early 1900s all the way up through the 1950s, 1960s, and they've kind of made a comeback, and they're becoming popular again. But this is called what? Anybody know? It's called a record. So if you've ever used a record, what is it used for? Anybody know? It's used to play music. So you would put this on a record player. It's like a really big CD. You'd put that on the record player, and a needle would come down, and this would spin, And the needle would run along these tracks on the record, and you would play music, and it would produce any kind of music that you had on the record. Our second object that we talked about was this one right here. Does anybody know what this one is? Some of you might know. This is a rotary telephone. So before there were cell phones, no one carried these around. Okay, this is a very heavy device, and it had to be plugged in to the wall. Okay, so you couldn't take this in your purse. You couldn't take it in your pocket. It was left at home. So back in the day, before cell phones, we didn't have phones that we carried around with us. This was at home, and so no one could get a hold of you unless you were home. So you would pick this up, and you would dial a number, and you would have to dial the number by moving your finger in the little hole and running around and wait for it to go all the way back around before dialing the next number. And if you messed up, guess what? You had to put the phone down, and you had to start all over. So this one, you would put this part to your ear, and you would talk in here, and the person on the other end could hear you. So something that you don't see around much anymore. A lot of people don't have those at their homes like we used to a long time ago. All right, and the last thing I wanted to show you is if you are looking for more about NASA or more about anything related to what we talked about today, the NASA website is nasa.gov, and they have created a whole network of NASA at home. And so you can check out the NASA website, and they are putting up a whole day of scheduled lessons every single day for students at home right now. So like today, they've got TV programming about NASA's Future Forward. They have an Earth Science video, Apollo 13, which is traveling to the moon. There's going to be some great video and footage about that. So I hope that you'll take the time to check out the NASA website. That was nasa.gov. They have a whole section for students to look at and get ideas. I've put some other books out for you in case you're wanting to read more about this period of time, or about Katherine Johnson. That's a great book, Counting on Catherine. These are all great sources for you and your family to check out and learn more about the Hidden Figures, or maybe even watch the movie Hidden Figures together and learn about this part of our history. I hope you have a great day. See you next week. Bye.
I'm with Mrs. Duff. Hi. I missed you this week. Did you miss me? I don't know if you're getting lots of hugs from your moms and dads, but reach out. Oh, give yourself a great big hug from all your teachers. Think about your teachers you're not seeing right now. They want hugs from you too. I've got Miss Park here, Miss Bacon and Mr. Trujillo, and Miss Park said Eli, Anderson, and Owen, who are kindergartners with us, might be watching, as well as their brothers and maybe some of their sisters. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. And Cassie sent me a wonderful message this morning. She's excited for the story today. Before we get started, I want to just do a couple of things that we normally do in our class here at Sequoyah Elementary. We usually practice saying our months of the year and our days of the week almost every day. And I wonder how many of you have done that while you're out of school. Be honest. Not very many of you, I think. So I think it's probably important that we practice that right now. Now, because I don't want Mr. Trujillo to get all upset with me because I jump up and I'm moving all around, I am going to do all the motions while I'm sitting down here so I'm not out of the picture. But I want you to stand up and do those with me. Ready? January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around once again. January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around one more time. Slow motion. January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around, sit down. Put your hands together, put them in your lap, just like if you were at school. Let's talk for a minute about what we're going to do today. I hope that you have your journal and something to write with. If you don't have a journal, we talked about that. You can use old mail. You can use anything that you have that just has a place to write on it for after our story. But also, we had to practice those months of the year because it's the month of April now. When we finished up at school, we were in March. And April comes after March. Last time that we were together, I showed you some eggs that Miss Raider brought, and I put those eggs in the incubator last week. Well, this week they've been in there 1 week. So I wanted to show you what they probably look like. I candled them last night, and almost all of them had just a very, very small little chicken. I have this set of plastic eggs. Just looks like a regular egg, but when you pop it open, on the inside, Mr. Trujillo, can you see that? On the inside is a little chick. Can you see that? That is what our chick looks like inside our egg right now. So I shined a little light at the bottom of the egg last night, and I could see the eyeball, and I could also see some blood vessels. You can't see that on here. But each chick, that's the way that they're getting their nutrients from the yolk, or the yolk of the egg. And then I also saw there was a little air pocket on each one of these. So they're kind of upside down like that in the incubator, and the incubator's turning them back and forth each day. So we'll just keep watching that and see how that goes. Now, I have this wonderful calendar I printed out to show you the progress each day, but guess what? When I looked at it this morning, there is no way you can see it. You probably can't even see anything. So we'll just use this as scrap piece of paper. And I printed a calendar. It didn't print. And I'm just like you. I only have the things at my house. So I found a calendar that I use for school. And this one says April. You probably can't see all the little lines, but if your parents have a wall calendar, if you want to look at it and find May 1st, which will be like after the last day of April, that's going to be the day these chicks hatch. So you might ask your parents if they have a calendar at home so you can mark off. We've had 7 days, and we set them on actually on the 10th, which was Good Friday. So that was the day we didn't have school. Yeah, we don't have school any day right now, but we're having school on TV, right? So on the 10th, then the 17th, that's tomorrow. That'll be exactly 1 week. And the 24th will be 2 weeks. Then the 1st will be 3 weeks. And in 21 days, those eggs are going to hatch. So it's kind of exciting. You'll have to watch. And because I had that fancy one, I thought, oh, it's going to look so much better than that old ratty one I have in my classroom that I needed to redo and didn't have time to. But if you'll see, we're right here. And that's what I just showed you was that egg. So we're number 7 on those eggs. So if you want to keep watching on my Storytime with Mrs. Duff page on Facebook, you are welcome to, and I'll kind of put some updates. Not a whole lot exciting going on right now with that, though. So today we're going to have a story, and we're going to talk about seeds and things growing, because this is the time of year that maybe your neighbors might be planting their gardens, grandmas, grandpas might be planting gardens. So I was kind of trying to sit on my back porch and think of a story to tell you, and then all of a sudden, all of these little, and where'd they go? My seeds disappeared. All of these little winged seeds blew across my back porch. And I don't mean there's just a couple. I mean, this wasn't all. They are all over my whole yard. And they blow in the wind like that. And when the wind catches them, they just blow across the fields, or they blow through my backyard. And actually, I went out and I have a table with little holes, and they were stuck all in the little holes. It looked like the little holes had hair. It's kind of cute, actually. It looked like one of those Play-Doh guys that the hair sticks up out of. So we have some words we're going to use in the story. Seeds. Can you see the words and read those with me today? I don't know if you can see them. I kind of moved them and did them a little darker today. And I have a word that rhymes with seeds. It is weeds. Seeds. Weeds. Then I have a word soil, wind. Can anybody read that one? That's a pretty simple one. Plant. Plant. Good job, guys. Sun. Water. That one's a little different. Wings. Fred. Fern. Wait a minute. Fred and Fern. That's who our story's going to be about. Fly. And there's weeds again. So if we want to think about words that maybe rhyme with soil, like some of you might live in the town of Foil. That rhymes with soil. Toil. Plant. Let's think of something that rhymes with plant. I know of a little bug that rhymes with plant. That's right, ant. Good job. Shout out words that rhyme with sun. Bun. One. Yes, we used sun last week. Fun. Good. Fred. How about bed, like as in flower bed? Well, I'm ready to start my story, and it actually is going to be about seed distribution and how the wind moves seeds, and sometimes different seeds get different places, like stick tights, those little sticky things, they'll stick to your socks. Those will stick there, and when you walk somewhere else, that's a seed, and it'll drop off and plant itself in the ground wherever it drops off. Sometimes it just makes it to mom or dad's washing machine and has to drop off there. Also, there's another way that seeds can get distributed, not just by wind, not just by stick tights. Birds eat those seeds and they fly around, and every once in a while we know what those birds do. It's kind of gross. They poop. And when they poop, that white poop comes down, and if you look, there might be little seeds in it. Sometimes it'll be different colors, and it's because of what the birds have eaten. And if they take those seeds somewhere else and they drop that somewhere, maybe in the middle of another yard, that seed they picked up in your yard might go to someone else's yard. That's kind of cool, isn't it? So now let's talk about our story. I think our story is going to be about a fairy family today. And boys, don't go, oh, a fairy family, I don't want to listen, because just because it's about a fairy family doesn't mean there's not going to be fun boy stuff in here. Because this is about a fairy family that lived on the edge of Mr. Baker's garden. Mr. Baker had peas and corn and watermelons and cantaloupe and squash and carrots and spinach. I know you all love spinach. And lettuce and all kinds of wonderful things in his garden. Well, Mr. Baker had to have help in his garden. So the fairy folk that lived in the garden had to take care of some of the things for Mr. Baker that he couldn't see. You see, he was very nearsighted. So when he went out to his garden, he didn't always see everything he needed to take care of. So the fairy folk lived in a turned-over pot. Right underneath, they had a wonderful house with a fireplace and a kitchen and a really nice comfy beds and a nice comfy sofa. And they loved to just hang out in there. And little Fred and Fern lived in there with their mom and dad, Fergus and Franny. Well, Franny was a fairy nurse, and she went and took care of all those fairy folk that got stick-tight stuck to him. When we get stick-tight stuck to us, those are those little sticky things, and they stick kind of like Velcro to our socks, and they really don't bother us. They're kind of scratchy. But think about if you were a little bitty fairy and a stick-tight stuck to you. I mean, sometimes the fairies have to have some stitches from those stick-tights, and sometimes they have allergies just like you and I, and when they get out in all the seeds and amongst all the things growing and the mold and the pollen, they start sneezing and sniffling and they need to go to the doctor. Well, that's where Franny worked. Well, Franny also, her husband Fergus, worked in a plant where they took the sunflower seeds out of shells and they bagged them up for the little fairies for the winter. Fern and Fred were left at home sometimes. Fred was a teenager, and he just liked to hang out, read books, play on his little fairy phone. He just liked to just hang out. Well, Fern would get so bored, and he'd go, Fernie, quit bothering me. Fernie just wanted to go out and do her own thing. So one day, Fred wasn't paying attention to Fernie, and he was a big, strong brother. And he used to play knights, and he would go out and they'd pretend they had swords, or they would pretend that they would go out and pick the little dandelions out of the field for the farmer, and every morning they'd have to go walk in the fields together. But after that, he just did not want to play with Fernie. He'd been at home with her just too long. So Fernie decided she was going to go out on her own and just explore the neighborhood and see what was new. Well, when Fernie got outside of their wonderful little fairy house, she saw that there were these great winged seeds everywhere. Well, Fernie was tiny. She was so little that when she grabbed a hold of one of these seeds, she didn't mean to, but the wind picked her up like they were wings, and she started flying across the yard. She flew far, far away from Mr. Baker's garden. She flew through the Jones backyard, and she flew through Mrs. Park's front yard, and she even almost landed on the swing set, almost hit the swing set, thought she was going to get to grab it. Nope, she went on past it. She almost landed on a doghouse. And then all of a sudden the wind stopped, and these winged seeds, she let go of them, and she fluttered to the air. I have to tell you something kind of sad about Fern. Her brother could fly, and her mom could fly, and her dad could fly, but Fernie was kind of young, and her wings just weren't big enough to fly yet. So this was really the first time she had flown without riding on her brother's back or her mom and dad carrying her. She was kind of scared. Because think about it, if that was the first time you'd ever flown somewhere, and she had never been that far away from her fairy home. This was the first time, and she started to get kind of scared. And when she dropped down, she dropped right into the middle of a great big flower. And she sat there on the flower thinking, what am I going to do? She started to cry. I just don't know how I'm ever going to get home. And poor little Fernie, since she'd never been away, she just started crying. I just wish Fred was here. About that time, a bee came along and landed right beside the flower. She saw the bee on its way, and she hid underneath the flower like it was an umbrella, kind of like that story Miss Woodson told the other day. And she came out from under to peek at the bee. Just as the bee was getting ready to take off, guess what she did? She got really brave. that bee had pollen stuck all to it, so it didn't know. Fernie grabbed a hold of that bee's leg and flew off with the bee, hanging on as tight as she could. Well, the bee didn't stay close to the ground. The bee flew really high and higher and higher and higher until Fernie got stuck in a tree. She flew into a tree, really high tree. And Fernie got stuck in that tree. And she was still kind of crying. But what she noticed was she was getting closer to Mr. Baker's garden again. She was getting closer to where her little fairy house was. And she thought, if only I could find another way to get over to my home. She started to yell, but she knew her brother Fred was just too into his phone in the house. He had already done his work for the day out in the garden, and he wasn't going to come and rescue her. She thought about it, and she thought about it, and she thought about it. And then she found a great big leaf. And she thought, well, those seeds carried me through the air. So maybe if I grab a hold of some leaves, they'll act like umbrellas too. So she grabbed a hold of one great big leaf and held it over her head, and she jumped. She had to be so brave. And she jumped out of that tree, and she floated all the way down to the edge of Mr. Baker's garden. Well, by this point, Fred had been in the house, and he decided that he and Fernie needed to go pick some more dandelions out of the garden and start blowing the dandelion seeds all over the place in other areas so they didn't get Baker's garden. Well, little Fernie, she saw her brother come out of their fairy house just about the time she landed on the edge of the garden, and she said, Freddie, I'm here. And he said, well, where have you been? He didn't even know she was gone until just at that moment. So as Fernie walked towards Freddie, she said, Freddie, you won't believe it. I flew on my own. And he said, Fernie, he said, let's have a flying lesson today. So that day, instead of sitting and playing on his phone in the house and hanging out, eating all the snacks and watching TV, they went outside, and Freddie taught his sister Fernie how to fly. So she learned how to fly, and from that point on, anytime they were out collecting dandelions, she could pluck one and fly it to the edge where all the weeds were supposed to be. All those dandelion seeds away. So they would land where the weeds were, and they wouldn't be in Mr. Baker's garden. The end. Now, boys and girls, we had a few characters in that story. We talked about the mom and dad, but they really weren't characters in the story, were they? They just went off to work, and they weren't part of it. But we had Fernie, and we had Freddie. And Fred and Fern were really our main characters, weren't they? And Fern found a bee, and she learned how to fly. And she realized that her tiny wings had grown big enough that she could fly. She used the wind to fly. We talked about seeds and soil. So today, when you get out your journal, after Mrs. Duff's finished with story time, and you get out your journal, and you want to journal in there, you can journal about the little fairy. You could journal about what Fred was doing. You could journal about all the ways that she flew and all the places she went. Now, if you really want to get detailed, you could take a piece of paper and you could fold it half and half again. And when you do that and you open it up, you have what is called 4 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you could draw what happened first in the story, and second in the story, and third in the story, and fourth in the story. Finally, that would be where the end would go. But if you don't want to do that, and you just want to use a plain journal page, you could draw a picture of what happens to the little fairy and write some words. Some of these words, maybe wind. She flew with the wind. The seed. She grabbed the seed and flew through the air. Whatever you want to do is the right thing to do when you're journaling. journaling, boys and girls. Now, I'm going to close this journal because I have one more activity to show you before we go today. Pretty exciting activity. And I got some of these ideas from a story called The Tiny Seed, written by Carle. He's one of my favorite. He's also the one that wrote, the author that wrote The Very Hungry Caterpillar. He also wrote, I'm trying to think of another one, The Very Busy Spider. So there are several stories that he has written that we really love and we've used here in school. But this is The Tiny Seed, and it's about a seed that floats and it lands in all these places where it can't take root. But it finally plants itself. Well, seeds don't always plant themselves. Sometimes people have to plant them. And if you go out in your yard, you might see winged seeds like this, because I'm telling you, they are all over. My whole yard is this color. It's this tan kind of whitish color, and these seeds are everywhere. So if you don't have any other seeds to plant, you could go find some winged seeds or some seeds outside. But I want to show you an activity that you can do. Now, I planted some seeds in dirt, and we put them down in there. And each year in our classroom, we usually have master gardeners come. But today I'm going to show you where you can just take a plastic baggie. And this is just a plain paper towel or a napkin. And you fold it, put it down inside of your baggie, just kind of like that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but kind of towards the bottom there. And if you might have some seeds like I have bean seeds and lima bean seeds and garden bean seeds. I have all kinds of seed packets in here, carrots, corn, all kinds of seeds in here. And your parents might have seeds like that if they've planted a garden, but they might not either. You might just have things in the kitchen that you can use. These are plain brown beans that we'll probably put some in the crock pot either today or tomorrow. That sounds pretty good. We found a good cornbread mix we're going to have with it. And I'm just going to take 3 of these brown beans out, and I think you probably can't see them, so I'm going to kind of show them. I don't know if you can see them there. And then I've got my baggie. I'm going to take my bag, and I'm going to stick my seeds right down in my bag. Can you see those, boys and girls? Yeah? And your moms and dads, if they're watching, they can do this. It's very simple. And then I've got some water right here, just plain old water. Mr. Duff didn't finish his water. Got this off the cabinet this morning. Kind of wasteful. And we're just going to put a little bit right down inside of here. Not a lot. See, not a lot. I didn't fill up my baggie. I don't want too much. Just a little. Just maybe if you were going to take a sip of water, that much. And then I'm going to kind of squish it around and make sure that my beans are where I can see them. So I can see my beans. I'm going to zip it, but not all the way, because I don't want all the water, the air to get out. I don't want all the moisture to get out, but I don't want it to be wide open either. So I'm going to take a piece of tape or something to put this up in the window and tape it on your window where some sun can get to it. And pretty soon you'll see that there's going to be maybe some little vines growing up here, but you'll get to see some roots growing out of the bottom of it as well. Now, we didn't plant this, so it's not going to grow because it's not going to produce any more beans because we didn't put it in soil. So if you actually want to plant something and your parents have some soil or you have soil at your house, you could actually plant your very own plant. And if you'll notice, I used one of Mr. Duff's water bottles. He's not very good with the environment. It's almost Earth Day. I'm going to have to talk to him about that. And we planted a bean seed, kind of similar to what I just planted, but this is a green bean. And this grew in about 2 weeks. My daughter Eileen and I planted this. If you notice, it's just in a water bottle. But you can get anything to plant in. I found this that my cousin Maureen gave me last year for Easter. It's just a little glass jar. And I'm just going to put some dirt in there. And then I could just put a little seed down inside there. But now, if I put this in the dark, it's not going to grow because plants need 3 things. They need sun, water, and soil. The soil gives them all the nutrients they need to grow. But if you just put it in soil and you put it in a dark place and it never sees the sun and it never gets watered, it's not going to grow. If you happen to water it and put it in a dark place, guess what? Still not going to grow. But if you take this with the seed and the soil and the water and you put it in the sunlight, it will grow. That is why we don't have gardens in the winter, because our sun is too far from the earth to make our gardens grow. And boys and girls, we have about 1 minute left, and I just want to let you know, I'm happy that you joined me today. I did start a Facebook page. I noticed a lot of other teachers were doing that, and it's Story Time with Mrs. Duff. If you are not from Sequoyah, if you're from Tulsa School or Foyle or Catoosa or Adair or Inola or one of the surrounding schools, and you're able to see our broadcast, and you drew me a wonderful picture in your journal today, or you used some of these words or did a foursquare or planted, let me know. You have a good week. Love you. Goodbye.
RSU Learn TV. My name is Barbara Smith, and I will be with you for the next 30 minutes. I am a teacher at Sequoyah, and I teach middle school language arts. So today we're going to be talking about Greek and Roman mythology, but before we get started, I'm going to give a shout out to Veronica. Happy birthday, Veronica. And Arun, I know you're watching, so hi to Arun. So we're going to talk Greek and Roman mythology. We're going to do a principal review of the Greek gods and goddesses, and then at the end, we are going to have about 7 minutes to make a paper Zeus. So you might want to get a toilet paper roll, which y'all should have those. So, all right, let's get started. So what is a myth? Well, it's not something you tell your parents when you don't clean your room. That would be a little white lie. A myth is a traditional story rooted in primitive folk beliefs of cultures. It uses supernatural to interpret natural events, explains a culture's view of the universe and the nature of humanity. So again, not something you tell your teachers when you forget your homework. So last week we talked about themes in stories, and some of those themes are revenge, jealousy, vanity, deception, and manipulation. And so you're going to see that a lot of these themes show up in Greek mythology. Now, you would think that the Greek gods and goddesses would be better than humans because it sounds like base emotions to me. So base emotions are things that we don't have to be taught, that they're already innate in us. And so those things are things like anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. So, you know, I thought Greek mythology gods were supposed to be better than us. But it sounds like a Jerry Springer show every time. So in the beginning, so it has to have a backstory, right? Everything has to have a beginning. Before you had Zeus, you had something else. It came from something. So in the beginning, it was chaos, shapeless, and nothingness. And I think that's where they got the idea for Spanx. Chaos had two children, night, darkness, which we call darkness. You know, at night it's dark unless you live in Finland in May, then it's 24 hours of light. And then Erebus was death. So all was black, empty, silent, and endless. And the love was born out of darkness and death. I don't know what to say about that. So it's been spontaneous combustion, I guess. So, and then, so it's like at the drive-thru, and then, when love was born, order and beauty began to flourish. Love created light and day. Earth was created. She was the solid ground, but also a personality. And the earth bore heaven to cover her and be a home for the gods. So before we go on to the next slide, I want you to pay very close attention. Earth bore heaven. Okay, you got that? We're getting into Jerry Springer stuff here. So the first parents. So in Greek mythology, because you have to have a beginning, so the first parents were Mother Earth, which is Gaia. There's two different spellings for Gaia. Gaea would be one of the spellings, but Gaia is normally what most people spell it because it just sounds phonetically correct. So the first parents were Mother Earth and Father Heaven. Did y'all catch that? Mother Earth and Father Heaven. Father Heaven was also called Uranus. So when we get into the Roman names of Greek gods, a lot of them have planetary names. They're associated with different planets. That's what I'm trying to say. So they had three kinds of children. 3 monsters with 100 hands and 50 heads. Now imagine taking that to a grocery store, right? You'd like, stop touching everything. And then 3 Cyclops and the Titans. Well, I have a picture here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that was what the 100 hands and 50 heads look like. And I wouldn't want to meet that in a dark alley. I would be like, okay, here's my purse and my keys to my house and car. You can have it. I would not want to come face to face with one of those things. They're pretty scary. So looking back, I wanted to find out if Cyclops was spelled with an ES. Because I've seen it with ES a lot. So I did some research on it and found the origin of the word Cyclops, which I thought was pretty interesting. I like to know like root words and where they come from. So you guys know that the Cyclops is the guy that has the eye in the middle of his head. So the Greek word for the first word is kuklos, which means circle. And then you pair that with the Greek word ops, which means eye. Now, I know you guys have heard the word op before. Think about it. Who do you go see if you need your eyes checked? That's right. You see an optometrist. So you combine those two words and you get kuklops, which means round eye. Well, that makes sense, right? Because he has a round eye in the middle of his head. Why don't we just call it what it is? But then it derived into Latin, where we have what we know now as the spelling Cyclops. He's a cute guy. All right, Titans. There were many of them. That's too many to count, really. They were enormous in size, incredible strength. Kronos was also associated with a planet, Saturn. And he was the ruler of the Titans in the beginning. He was the ruler. And his wife was Rhea. And then Ocean was the river that encircled the world. So these are the Titans. And they considered the ocean part of the Titans. And I guess that makes sense because we call all the water in our world an ocean now. I'm not sure where that really comes from. Maybe you guys can research that. That would be a fun research activity. So we have principal gods. So from the principal gods, Kronos and Rheas, they were the parents of Zeus, Poseidon. So remember, when we say parents, we're talking about sisters and brothers here. So pay attention because this is going to end up as a Jerry Springer show. Zeus, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Demeter. Why did I say Demeter? It's Demeter. All right, and then other Olympians. Okay, so you're probably wondering why these are Titans and these are Olympians, and I have a backstory for that too. Other Olympians include Athena, Ares, Hebe, Hephaestus, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Aphrodite, Dionysus, and Persephone. And anyone who has read a book, especially Percy Jackson and the Lightning King, the Odyssey, or read any of the Greek mythology, you come across these characters constantly. So, and usually people associate or they like one or the other more. I tend to like Hermes, and we'll talk about Hermes because he is a character. Okay, so how did the Olympians become Olympians? Usually we associate the Titans synonymously with the Olympians, and they were. But here's what happened. So the Titans were in control up until Kronos lost power to Zeus, because Zeus decided, hey, I think I could be better and stronger, and I'm going to overthrow my father. And so that's what he did. And then he created this whole little clan called the Olympians, and he said, Nana, Nana, boo-boo, y'all can't get in my club. And that's how that happened. That's the short version of it, the Miss Smith version. So Zeus, his Roman name is Jupiter, also a planet. Forgot what that planet looks like. Saturn has the rings, right? Okay. They also call him Jove. He is the supreme god of the Olympians, and he fathered many characters in mythology. So at the end of this, say we're going to make a paper Zeus. He's cute, right? This one has special powers, guys. Just FYI, you'll see. Okay, so he married Hera. Are y'all keeping up? Okay. This is like a family reunion from Crazy Town. So he married Hera. Her Roman name is Juno. She is his sister and his wife. I don't know, guys. I think the Olympians, the mythological gods, they kind of defy genetic law. But she is the jealous protector of marriage, and she punished the women Zeus fell in love with. She didn't punish Zeus. I don't know. I think I'd be a little afraid of him. But she punished the women that he fell in love with. So whenever you see Hera depicted, you see her with peacock feathers or a peacock because she loved peacocks. And the reason for that is because she was pretty vain, and she liked to associate herself with things that were beautiful. So that was her little, she even kept like pet peacocks according to Greek myth. Poseidon, his Roman name is Neptune. He is the god of the seas and the water. And when we talk about, when they also label him as Earthshaker, which I don't know why. I would think Zeus would be the Earthshaker because he throws the lightning bolts down, kind of, in the stormy night. That is what rattles us, like the thunder and lightning. But he's called the Earthshaker. He can, create hurricanes and typhoons and tsunamis. So it's not a good idea to make this guy mad either. See what I'm talking about, all those base emotions like anger. Seems like these guys are always mad about something and taking revenge out on someone. So Hades, his Roman name is Pluto. Again, another planet, if it did or did not exist, right? I don't know where we are with it this year in 2020. Does it exist or does it not exist? God of the underworld, and he kidnapped Persephone. Okay, so Hades and Zeus are brothers. And Hades kidnaps Persephone and takes her to the underworld. And Persephone is technically his niece. It's like they have nothing better to do. They have to fight with each other. Hestia, her Roman name is Vesta. She's the goddess of home, and she's a powerful protector. Now, I have seen, like you could get these amulets to wear, these coins that have Hestia in this form. It's like this drawing right here, engraved on those medallions that you wear around your neck for protector of the home. I've seen that before. Demeter, her Roman name is Ceres, and she's the goddess of harvest. With Ceres, when you find pictures of Demeter or Ceres, you can look them up under both names, but you're always going to see her depicted with a stalk of wheat, which you see here, and then a torch. I'm not sure what the torch signifies, but if she's the goddess of harvest, then the wheat makes sense. So Athena. Okay, so there's a really good story behind Athena and Medusa. I kind of forgot how Athena or Medusa became Medusa until I read a short story about her. But Athena, her Roman name is Minerva, and she's the goddess of wisdom and war. She sprang from Zeus's head. So as the story goes, it's pretty vivid, but Zeus's head began to crack and split open, and then she just sprang out, like as a full adult person. So, I mean, if you've read any mythology, none of these people have any normal births. They kind of just spring to life somehow, or spontaneous combustion, just ta-da, here we are. And they walk and talk. I thought I had some more. Okay, so I do have notes on her. So Athena actually is the one who turned Medusa into Medusa. Now, Medusa's name was Medusa, but before she was an ugly snake woman, she was a beautiful girl, but her problem was she was too proud, so she went around and boasted about how proud she was. And then one day she visited the Parthenon in Athens, and she said, you know what, they could have done so much better. They could have used me as a subject instead of Athena. And that made Athena mad. So she said, for your pride, you're going to suffer for eternity. So she turned her into a snake-headed thing, and she sent her to the ends of the earth. Pretty crazy. So Ares, he's the Roman god of war. He's the god of war. His Roman name is Mars. He is the son of Zeus and Hera. He is bloodthirsty and merciless. So this guy was good at strategy. He was good at winning wars. He was good at fighting. I mean, look how buff he is. So whenever they needed something done, they sent him to wreak havoc and carnage on people. All right, Hephaestus. This is a hard name to say. I had to say it over and over again to prepare for this slide. Hephaestus. So his Roman name was Vulcan, which if I think of a Vulcan, I think of a big, gigantic bird. But he's the god of fire and forging. So forging as in blacksmithing. So he builds stuff. And anytime you see him depicted, you're going to see this thing that looks like an anvil or something to hammer metal with. So a hammer, I guess. And so in this picture right here, he's actually forging something with fire. So whenever I see him with the hammer, I always think of Thor. You guys know who Thor is, right? But not as cute as Thor, right? This dude is not as cute as Thor. I'll take our modern day Thor any day. All right, and so he is kind unlike his brother Ares. So Ares the meanie, and he's the good guy. Where have you heard that sort of story before? So here we have love and hate again as one of our themes, and revenge, because there are some stories where they actually have some problems. So Apollo, his Roman name is Apollo. So Greek is Apollo and Roman is Apollo. He is the god of light, sun, and music. His brother is Artemis, or he is the brother of Artemis. I always get that wrong. Artemis is a girl. Don't forget that, because I'm going to mess it up on the next slide. Okay, so anytime you see Apollo depicted, he has this thing right here, which is called a lyre. It's sort of like this harp that he carries around. Now there's a back how he got that harp. So one day he came to see his cattle, and all his cattle were gone. And then he talked to like a sheep herder, and he said, "Have you seen my cattle?" The sheep herder said, "Hey, I saw this babe driving your cattle backwards, and then he hid them." And so he knew exactly where to go. So he went to Hermes and he said, "Where are my cattle?" And Hermes took him to him. And Apollo saw that Hermes had actually killed 2 of his cattle to make that lyre, because he used the cow gut to make that lyre. And so Apollo was really mad. He's like, "You are going to pay for this." And Hermes said, "Oh, no, wait a minute. I have a present for you. Here you go." And he handed Apollo the lyre. And as soon as Apollo struck a note on a lyre, he was instantly entranced, and he fell in love with it. And he said, "Keep my cattle. I just want this lyre." And so that became a symbol for him. And that's why he became the god of music. So Artemis, girl, female. I always get this wrong. Artemis, her Roman name is Diana. And she is the goddess of the moon and hunt. So anytime you see her depicted, like in this picture here, she has a crescent moon on her head. And then also in one of her other symbols are the bow and arrows that she keeps. And she is the sister to Apollo. Hermes, last but not least. Okay, so Hermes is my favorite because he's a little devil. He's a tricky little sucker. His Roman name is Mercury, also again associated with the planet, and he is the messenger of the gods. He kind of is like the jack of all trades because, one, he doesn't want to make anybody mad, so he tries to stay on everyone's good side. That's part of that manipulation and deception like he did with Apollo. He appears in more myths. So what happened with him, so I looked him up, and he's considered the god of trickery. He's also the patron god of liars and thieves, gamblers, commerce and trading, and one story even credits Hermes with the invention of scales, the alphabet, and card games. Jack of all trades, right? This guy is crazy. I think that's all I have on that. Aphrodite, her Roman name is Venus. I don't know if you guys can see that picture. This is not a really good picture. The picture that I did have was of Venus in the half shell, and she's coming up out of the ocean. Now, a lot of pictures that you're going to find, paintings, pictures, sculptures of Venus, they're probably not appropriate for young ages because they depict her with not a lot of clothes on. So, but again, she comes right out of the water in a half shell, kind of like Athena springing from Zeus's head, not a natural birth. She kind of just pops out and says, "Here I am." So, and it says she sprang from the ocean foam. Dionysus, his Roman name is Bacchus. He's the god of wine. So anytime you see this guy depicted, he's going to have a glass of wine, and his wreath on his head are grape leaves. Persephone, this is the last slide for the Greek gods and goddesses. So her Roman name is Proserpina. It's really hard to say. It makes me think of prosperity, but I don't know how that would be because she is the goddess of the underworld. And she was the one that Hades kidnapped and took to the underworld. So anytime you see a picture of Persephone, she's not very happy. She's been condemned to live there for eternity. Okay, so right now we are going to make a paper Zeus. And let me get to that slide. So we're going to make a paper Zeus, and you can do this at home. You just need an empty toilet paper roll. So I'm going to come over here. Just need an empty toilet paper roll. So one of these. And if you don't have an empty toilet paper roll handy, and your mom and dad don't want you to take all the toilet paper off of it, you can use an empty paper towel roll, but just cut it to the size that you need. So you're going to need an empty paper towel roll, and you're going to need scissors and glue. Now, on my website, on the plan book for Sequoyah, I have this template that's you can use, and you can cut this out. You don't have to use this template. You can use construction paper, or you can design your own outfit for Zeus, but this was just kind of handy. So I pre-cut everything, and so I have my Zeus here. I put the thunderbolt on the wrong side, but here's what it looks like. And this Zeus has special powers, and you'll see that in a second. Let's get this stuff out of the way. So, and then I also put the template for Medusa. If you guys want to make Medusa, she is also there. All right, so we're going to just put her right there. Hey, can you guys see her? She's ugly, right? I feel bad for her. What's about to happen? Okay, so you're going to take your empty toilet paper roll, and we're going to, 4 minutes, okay. We're going to glue, where's my toilet paper roll? Okay, we're going to glue Zeus's body on. So, I brought the wrong glue.
It's not going to work, man.
I brought the wrong glue. We're going to simulate it, guys. Do we have tape? You can use tape. Okay. So you can use tape. I pre-cut everything because I, figured we'd run into some problem. So she's going to tape Zeus's body very quickly.
Okay. Now what? What am I taping now?
Okay. We're going to tape his head on. Tape his head on.
Where's his head?
And, of course, let's do his arms. Because, you got it? Oh, here, you want one? We're going to tape his arms.
I dropped his arm.
Because we have to get him ready because he's, special powers. Well, okay, do you want to do the...
He's not going to be proportionate today.
Yeah, not proportionate.
He's going to be a little lopsided.
Okay. How many minutes do we have? Okay, so here we go. His lightning bolt, let's put his lightning bolt in his hand. I think it's supposed to go the other way, but whatever. We're improvising because I brought the wrong glue. That's not going to work. And he usually has a belt around him. So we won't do the belt today, but he has his belt and then, of course, his feet. So you guys can do this at home with the template, but, the story Perseus actually kills Medusa, but in this instance, Perseus Perseus is not here, so we have to get rid of Medusa. So Zeus, I told you he has special powers. You guys ready? Say bye-bye. Oh. Uh-oh. She's dead. So you guys can build this at home or make this at home. Build it. We kind of built it because I brought the wrong glue. Anyway, next up is Mrs. Dorsey, and she's going to talk to you today about math. I've had fun. Shout out again to Veronica. Happy birthday. And I will see you next week. I'm done.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Mrs. Dorsey back with another fun 30 minutes of math. I want to give a shout out today to my third and fourth hours. I want to say hi to Ethan, Jenna, Chupacabra, you know who you are, Tortellini, and I miss everybody. Just a few things that I've been doing this week since we've been away from each other. I got a little bit of a sunburn. I try to get a tan, but I'm pasty white, so it just goes super red. So last week we spoke about I just forgot what we spoke about. We spoke about how to put like terms together and how to identify terms in an algebraic expression. So this week, we're going to build on top of that, and we're going to go into one-step and two-step equations. And as you can see, that's what we're going to learn today. So we're just going to get right into it. Okay? This problem says solve, and solve might be a new vocabulary term for you. And what solve means is to find the answer. And of course, when we're solving equations, that's the difference between an algebraic expression and an equation. With the algebraic expression, there is no equal sign. So remember, we just took those terms and we simplified them to the smallest we could, but the variable was still a part of that expression. With an equation, we want to find out, what is that variable? What does it represent? And on a couple of my slides, I tried to find some really cute math jokes. I like to be funny. My students don't think I am. My husband doesn't think I am. My kids don't think I am. But I think I am. So that's all that matters. Remember, what you think of yourself is all that matters. So the square root of 9 is 3. True, false, or who cares? Many students actually look forward to Mr. Atwater's math tests. Sometimes I sneak in funny questions like that too. But let's get right to it. So this says solve x plus 6 equals 4. Check your solution. So we're going to do the x plus 6 equals 4 first, and then I'm going to show you what check your solution really means. So I'm going to rewrite it over here to the side. And when you have one-step equations, you want to make sure that you keep your variables on one side and your constants on the other. So sometimes students get confused, well, what do I move first? Because I see a 6 and a 4. And some kids want to move the 4 to the other side. But I have kind of like a silly story. In the land of algebra, my numbers and my letters don't like each other. And the variables are sort of in charge of the kingdom. And they want to get those numbers, the constants, out of there. So they are kicking them out of the kingdom, but the numbers are going to get the last laugh because they're going to do the opposite, they're rebellious teenagers, of what the kingdom is saying to do. So your variable x in this example always stays. It does not move. And whatever number is on the same side as the variable, that's how you know what to move. So we have a plus 6 or a positive 6, and the opposite of that is negative 6. So we need to show what we're doing on both sides of the equal sign. That way, your teacher knows that you understand that 6 is going away on that side and it's moving to the other side where the 4 is. So make sure you cancel your work and then you just do the math. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. So x equals negative 2. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Mrs. Dorsey, I can just look at that problem and figure out that the answer would be negative 2 just by sort of plugging in different values. And that might very well be the case because we start out simple. So we're building foundational blocks. You know, we're putting tools in your algebra toolbox. But when you get to more complicated problems, you can't just plug a number in and hope it's successful. It's important to show your work. And I'm sure some of you are rolling your eyes. I don't like to show my work. You need to make sure that you do. Okay? So here we have 14 plus y equals 20. You know what? I didn't show you how to check your solution on the first slide. I'll do it here. 14 plus y equals 20. It's a different variable. And you're going to find that in problems, you have all sorts of different variables. Most of the time, it'll either be N or X or Y, but I could put in C if I wanted to. It doesn't matter. So don't let that confuse you, okay? So I'm going to rewrite the problem so it's visible for you guys at home. And it says 14 plus y equals 20. Now, I'm looking at this plus sign, and I'm automatically thinking, oh, I must be subtracting. Don't make that mistake. That plus sign goes with the y and tells me that's a positive y. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the 14. So I want to look at the 14 and see if it's positive or negative, because that's going to tell me what I'm actually doing as far as an operation goes. So I can see that it's a positive 14. So I'm going to subtract 14 on both sides. And once again, we cross that out so that I know that you know that goes away. And then we just do the math. 20 minus 14 is 6. Make sure that you always bring, oh, I was writing 14 again. Make sure that you always bring down your variable and your equal sign, and then make sure that your variable is first. Remember, we spoke about that last week. It's a really good habit to get into that you put your variable first, because that's standard form once you get into like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, and higher. I don't do anything higher than that. It just blows my mind. But Miss Lewis does. Hey, Miss Lewis. So how do we check our solution? I'm going to do that in a different color. It's really cool. You can check your solution to see if you did the math correctly by taking your answer here, which is 6, and we're going to plug 6 back into the original equation. So that would look like 14 plus y, and I know that y equals 6, and then it says equals 20. So now I'm going to check, does 14 plus 6 actually equal 20? And the answer is yes. So I know that I did that correctly. Now, if you plug your answer back in and you don't get a balanced equation, and what does that mean? Think of like a scale, like the scales of justice. You want to make sure that whatever is equal on this side is the same thing equal on the other side. And so that's how you know that you've got a balanced equation. Okay. Ooh, this one looks a little bit different, Mrs. Dorsey. Why, yes, it does. So we have negative 5 equals b plus 8. That looks like a 6, but that's actually a b. My students get confused with that all the time. I can't change the way I write things, but that's a b. I'll underline it so you know. So sometimes the variable will be on a different side of the equal sign. That doesn't change anything. It doesn't change how I solve it. It doesn't change what I move. So I'm just going to, there's two things that you can do. The first thing you can do is just solve it as normal. The second thing that you can do, and I'll write it over here so you can see, is you can rewrite your equation. And I allow my students to do this because it doesn't change the problem. It doesn't change how they solve it. But many students are visual and they need consistency. So teachers, if that's something you've never thought of, you might want to try that and see if that helps with the confusion of this. So what you could do is you could write b plus 8. See, it didn't change. But bring your equal sign over here and then the negative 5. Some students will look at that and go, oh, I know how to do that. But I'm going to work it out this way so you can see that it's the same way. So the b is going to stay. the positive 8 becomes negative 8. That cancels out, and we move it over here. Now, please think of your integer rules. I have the same sign. I have 2 negatives. Don't think of your multiplication rules because that's completely different. In addition, when I have 2 signs that are the same, I keep the sign and I just add the numbers. So my answer here is negative 13 equals B. Now, this is why some kids like to rewrite the problem, because they don't have to switch the order this is in. And technically, at the 7th grade, 6th grade level, this isn't wrong. But like I said before, I like to make sure that my students create healthy habits. So I make them rewrite it with the B first and then the negative 13. And they might circle that. So remember, if you guys have any questions about anything I've taught or anything that we've discussed today, don't forget to email me. Or if you're my personal student, you can contact me through Google Classroom. And of course, it says check your solution. I'm not going to do that on every single problem because I've got a lot of slides to go through. But you could certainly plug this in. Something important to remember is when you have a negative answer and you plug it back into the variable, always make sure you put parentheses around it so that you know that negative hasn't become a subtraction sign. Okay. So here we have another one where the variable's on the wrong side of the equal sign, so to speak. So I'm just going to rewrite it for you so you can see it. And it's negative 12 equals 4 plus C. So again, think to yourself, what's going to stay? The C. What's going to move? The positive 4. And the positive 4 is going to become, very good, negative 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. And then this is exactly like the problem that we just did. Think of your integer rules, negative 12 and negative 4. They're the same sign, so I keep my sign and I add my numbers. So my answer is negative 16 equals C. And of course, algebra rules, good foundation, rewrite it to say C equals negative 16. Okay, isn't that dog cute? It's got glasses like me. And yeah, I have a dog at home. She's not big at all. Her name's Holly. Hi, Holly. Okay. Okay, here we have another one-step equation. Mrs. Dorsey, why are you doing so many? We already get it. Well, I am a firm believer that repetition builds confidence, and repetition helps you memorize it in your brain. Yes, so pay attention. Okay, what's going to stay? The Y. What's going to move? Mom? Very good, the 14. So it becomes negative 14 because remember, we always do the opposite. They're rebellious, just like I was as a teenager. Joking, not really. So we subtract that on both sides. And then we have Y equals, and what is 20 minus 14? 6. Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and skip this one just for the sake of time. I don't want to run out. Okay. Keep calm and do the math. Yes. Sometimes when you feel overwhelmed in math, your brain starts to shut down. So what I tell my students is take a deep breath, close your eyes, and allow your brain to process what you're seeing. Remember, you guys already have all the tools you need to be successful. It's somewhere in your brain. Give your brain just a minute to be able to run to that little file. I think of SpongeBob and where little SpongeBob is running through all those file cabinets in his brain, setting everything on fire. That's not fine dining. I don't want you to do that. You know, math is important, but please remember your own name. So we've got negative 12 equals 4 plus C. So ask yourself, what's going to stay? The C. What's going to move? The positive 4. And the positive 4 is going to do the opposite, which is become negative, or you can even say subtract 4. So whatever works in your brain to help you understand what you're doing. And remember those integer rules. So my answer is negative 16 equals C. Yes, you're right. Rewrite it, Mrs. Dorsey. I can hear you guys at home saying it. I can't really hear you at home, but I'm imagining you are. Okay, so here we have a subtraction problem, and it is x minus 2 equals 1. So all of the problems that we did before were originally, excuse me here, my eye's itchy. All of those problems that we just did were addition problems. And so I threw in probably too many slides, so I'm going to skip some here just for the sake of time. But this is a negative 2 or a minus 2. So just like we did before, ask yourself, what's going to stay? The x. What's going to move? The negative 2 or the minus 2. And the opposite of that is plus 2. And once again, this is one of those problems that you could probably look at it and just say, oh, I already know what the answer is. But we're building foundational math skills. So showing your work now, even though it might be a pain in the rear for you, in the long run, when you get to multi-step equations and you have to do 5 steps, you're not even going to think twice about showing your work. It's just going to be an automatic habit that you've created, and you'll have me to personally thank for that. You're welcome ahead of time. Okay, I'm going to skip that one. Here we go. Now we're into multiplication. So multiplication, the opposite of multiplication is not addition. Okay, some of you probably just said that out loud, and you'd be wrong. It's okay to be wrong, just as long as you learn from your mistake. The opposite of multiplication is division. So whenever you see a number letter stuck together, that means times, and the opposite of times is division. So here we go. I'm going to rewrite the problem, nice and big for you to see. And the x is still going to be what stays. So the opposite of that is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And I'm going to bring my x down, bring my equal sign down, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. Okay, I've got my cute little baby over here with the glasses. See a theme? It says, I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. I'm going to let you ponder that. Get back to me. Okay, here we have 39 equals 3y. And once again, our y is going to stay. It's not going to move. Our 3 is what's going to move because it's attached to the y. So remember, we're kicking the numbers out of the kingdom of algebra. I'd let them stay, but I didn't make the rules. So divide both sides. And you get, I'm going to rewrite it over here. You get y equals, what is 39 divided by 3? It is 13. Now, how you would check your solution for this is the same way we did with the addition problem. We rewrite our problem, and we're going to plug in 13 where the y is. And once again, you see me putting parentheses around anything that I plug in. That's a good habit to get into. And 39 is equal to 39, 3 times 13. So we did it right. Yay! Okay, what if I have a negative, Mrs. Dorsey, and I'm dividing? Does it change to a positive? No. I'm not adding or subtracting, so you keep that -4, and here we go. -4z equals 60. I divide both sides by -4, and z equals,
anybody want to tell me what 60 divided by 4 is? Anybody at home?
15. -15. Don't forget that negative. Opposite signs, when you're multiplying or dividing, your answer is always going to be negative. Okay? Oh, now we've got some division. Oh, but here's a funny joke. Why is the number 6 so scared? Hold on. Because 7, 8, 9. Hilarious, right? Just laugh. Give me that much, okay? Thank you. So, I have A divided by -4 equals -9. Now, for some reason, division problems seem to be some of the most confusing problems in, 5 minutes, in the math world. Because we do so many multiplication one-step equations, I don't think we do enough of these. So I try to tell my kids, whenever you see the fraction bar, you know you're going to be multiplying. So on this particular problem, I'm going to multiply both sides by -4. Now, what does that look like? And next week, I'm going to show you the more in-depth reason of why we do what we do. But for now, we're just going to do the simple part. So I'm going to put my -4 up here. And I'm going to use the multiplication symbol in algebra, which is the dot. And then, because I have my funny joke over here, I can't write it this way, so I'm going to write it down here. Okay? And those cross out. So what I'm left with is A equals, now think of your integer rules. I have a negative times a negative, which is what? Very, very good. It's positive, yeah. So my answer is 36. Ooh, here's another one. And we'll go ahead and check our solution here. So I'm going to rewrite m divided by 2 equals -10. Now remember, I see the fraction bar. So that means I am going to multiply because it's the opposite. Even the fraction bar in a fraction still means division. Bet you didn't know that. Or maybe you did because you're just too smart for your own britches. So we are going to multiply both sides by 2. Don't forget to use the dot for your multiplication symbol. Do not use the X. I know it's a hard habit to get out of, but you've got to do it. So that's going to cross out. And that's going to, now I've got room to do what I normally do over here because I don't have a funny joke. So now we've got m equals, and think of your integer rules with multiplication and division because they're the same. -10 times 2 is -20. Okay, so how do I check my solution in a division problem? Same thing we've done. We plug our answer back into the variable. So I'm going to, I write really big, I apologize. I'm going to write that up here. So -20 goes in the place of m, and the 2 goes where it was at, and that equals -10. So now I'm going to do the math. -20 divided by 2, that does equal -10, And I now have a balanced equation. Or you could say this is a true statement. Ooh, I'm going to save this problem for next week because it's a little bit more involved. Some of my students may be looking at that going, oh, Mrs. Darcy, that is so simple, which is great. But some of our friends may not think that's so easy. So
that is going backwards. For Waden, it's a big boy.
Okay, I just want to, this was my first slide, but it was too dark. And it says, Math with Mrs. Dorsey, a.k.a. the Mathemagician. I'd like to think that when I enter my classroom, that's what I become. So I hope you guys had a chance to look at those websites that I told you about last week. Khan Academy is a website, but it's also an app. I said that CUDA software was an app, but I don't think it is. I just think it's a website. And then I found some other ones, math drills, cool math games. If you're bored of doing just the typical problems like we did today, which I could never be bored of because it's so much fun, Cool Math Games is a great website for you to go to. All right, check it out. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Hey, welcome to Harshfield Science. Today we're going to talk about Bernoulli's principle. We're going to talk a little bit about how a plane flies. So to get us started, I'm going to show you something that's going to really upset your parents. It's going to be real obnoxious. What you do is you take 2 pop cans and put them real close together. Put your hand right on top to hold them in place. Take a straw and blow between them. Now, like I said, that's going to be real obnoxious, and your parents are not going to be happy with me, but give it a try. Now, if you were here last week, you probably remember this. This is called a windbag. And if I put it up here like this and blow into it, it's going to take about 15 or 20 breaths to blow this up. But if I hold it out here like this and blow, then I can do it in 3, maybe 4 breaths. And that is part of the same thing that happens with the pop cans. Here's what's happening. If I hold it like this and blow in, the only air going in is the air coming from my lungs. But if I hold it out here like this and I blow in, that air moving in is going to cause a slight pressure difference, and it's going to be pulling more air in. So how does this all affect how a plane flies? Well, let's take a piece of paper. And if you'll notice, when I hold this paper up like this, it has somewhat of a curved shape. When I blow on it like that, it has the same properties, the same effect as a wing does. If you look at a airplane wing, it looks something like this. It's got a nice curve on top, sort of flat on bottom. As the air flows over this, now remember, we've got air coming this way. As the air flows over it, it's going to follow the curvature of that wing. It's going to speed up. The air coming under this is going to follow a slight downslope, slight straight pattern. This air is going to push it down, so all the air is going to be pushing down like this. This air, when it speeds up, according to Bernoulli's principle, is going to have a lower pressure. This air is going to have a slightly higher pressure, and that's going to have an effect of pulling this wing up. A nice, easy way to think about this, and this is not correct, but it's a nice way to think about it. We have 2 particles of air here. They're friends. They're going to flow over this. One's going over the top, one's going on the bottom. Who has the farther distance to travel? This one coming over the top. This one is going to be following along here. Now, people, is a nice, easy way to remember this. People say these 2 friends are going to want to meet back here. So this one having farther distance to travel is going to speed up. That's going to cause a lower pressure and pull the wing up. That isn't quite the way it works. What happens is this particle flowing over here will speed up, but it has nothing to do with this particle here. They will not meet up back here at the back end of the wing. So we now have this pulling or lowering the pressure, pulling the wing up. This part is flowing here and pushing the wing up. So that's Bernoulli's principle as it applies to a wing. But here's something else. Newton's third law of motion says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. These particles here flowing under the wing are hitting the wing. That's the action. They're pushing the wing up. That's the reaction. And it's for that reason that these old-fashioned biplanes, planes that had two wings, did not fly very well. Because if we've got two wings like this, air coming in, pushing on that, is pushing down on this, decreasing the amount of lift. It's not very efficient. So we've got that. Now then, again, Newton's third law says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. All right, so what does this all have to do with how an airplane flies? We have this airplane. Now then, if you'll look at the end of the wing right here, you can see that curvature. You can see how flat it is here. The same is on this side. Believe it or not, the propeller that you see here is also a wing. Looking at the end of it, you can see that there's a curvature here, a flat edge here. It's going to decrease the pressure on one side, increase the pressure on the other side. As this propeller comes around, this wing, this side is pushing up, is pulling the plane forward. This one, the pressure is decreasing, so the ascending propeller has the power. All right, now then, that's going to give this plane the effect of getting to turn or wanting to turn, because this is going to create lift, this is going to produce some drag. So what they have done, if you'll notice that this plane here, and this is common for all planes, one wing is higher than the other, and you can see that by placing a straight edge along there. That angle right there counteracts the motion of this wing wanting to roll over. Now, we need to have lift, and that's what this does, is it provides lift. How can we increase the amount of lift that we have? Well, what do you think? Any ideas? All right, how about this? How about if we increase the air flowing over this surface? As it flows over, there's going to be more air flowing. It's going to be moving faster. It's going to decrease the pressure. It's going to increase the lift. So that is part of the reason when you see a plane take off or land, they're always landing into the wind. If the wind is blowing in this direction, the plane is going to take off or land in that direction. That is going to increase the air flowing over this. When we're taking off, we want this to move as fast as possible. We want as much lift as possible. So that's going to increase the airflow over this. Another way that we can increase the lift is by increasing what's called the angle of attack. Raising this angle up here. Excuse me. All right. So as we increase this angle like this, the air's got flowing over here. It's going to come off. It's going to go down at a steeper angle. There's going to be more air pushing on the bottom of this wing, pushing it up. So you may say, all right, great. Why don't we do something and increase this tremendously? Or is there a limit? Well, as we increase this angle of attack, there's going to come a point where the air is not going to flow over it smoothly. Again, we've got the air flowing this way, air flowing this way. As we increase this angle, there's going to come a point where the air cannot flow over as smoothly, and it's going to start to have some turbulence here. That's going to have the effect of killing or decreasing or eliminating the lift that these wings are providing. When that happens, a plane literally stops flying. It's what pilots call a stall. All right, so we've got the propeller pushing the plane, pushing the air over the wing. We've got the wings creating lift. But now, when you've looked at a plane, you'll notice that on the ground, a plane can only turn this way, left, right, what we would call yaw. All right, so if a plane is in the air like this, it now has three directions it can move. It has the yaw, it has what's called pitch, and it has what's called roll, like this. And pilots have the ability to control each of those directions. If they didn't, the plane would not fly where they want it to go. So how can they do this? How can they control the direction the plane's flying? Well, with the yaw, this way, we have back here a rudder. It's simply a wing that's on a vertical. As this rudder moves this way, it increases the pressure on the backside, decreases pressure here. It's going to pull the plane this way. It's going to pull the plane to the left. If we move the rudder back the other way, it's going to pull the plane to the right. Now you'll notice that there's this little flap along here. This is called an elevator. This is how a pilot controls the attitude of the plane, up or down. As this elevator moves up, is the position that it's in right now, this distance is decreased. The curvature under here is increased. Particles of air flowing under this will speed up. It will lower the pressure. It pulls the tail section down. Look what happens to the nose section. As the tail section goes down, the nose comes up. So that takes care of our pitch. Remember, we have our yaw, which is controlled by the rudder. We have the pitch, which is controlled by the elevator. But what about the roll? Remember, a plane can roll like this. To control that, these wings have what's called ailerons. These are flaps along the tail edge of the wing, and they work opposite of each other. So as this one comes down, this one comes up. What happens again? Yeah, the distance, the curvature here is increased, so the pressure is decreased down here. This one comes down, so the pressure is decreased up here. That's going to allow the plane to roll like this. Now, if we want to go the other way, the opposite is true. This aileron comes up, this one comes down, increasing the lift on this wing, decreasing the lift on this wing, and the plane will roll like this. So, if you're flying a plane, pilots have to be aware of all these different surfaces, all these different features, to make sure that the plane stays up and goes where it wants it to, where the pilot wants it to go. Again, we're going to take off and land into the wind to increase this. If you are on a commercial plane, you will probably see some other parts of the wing that, I don't know, maybe they look like they're falling apart. When their planes are landing, they're going to use the flaps here. They're going to drop both of them at the same time in the same direction. That's going to increase the lift, but it's also going to increase the air resistance. That air resistance is going to help slow the plane down. So when the plane finally touches down, it's not moving so fast. It doesn't take as much braking power to stop it. Commercial planes have what's called thrust reversers. Those are shields that will come down over the back end of the engine. The pilot will increase the thrust, pushing against those thrust resistors, and it has the same effect here. It's Newton's third law. Force, reaction. The force is the thrust pushing against that. The reaction is an increase in resistance, decreasing in speed. You will also see on the top part of the wing what they call spoilers. Those are flaps that are going to raise up. They're going to increase the air resistance, and that helps slow the plane down. Most jets, most commercial jets fly, say, from Tulsa to Kansas City, will take off and land at a speed of about 500 miles, or no, not 500, about 150 miles an hour. Smaller planes, like you would see if this was a real size plane, would take off maybe 50, 75 miles an hour. They want that maximum airflow over this to keep that airplane up. Another way that a pilot can control the plane when it's on the ground is in conjunction with the rudder. This front nose wheel will move. And he does that by moving pedals that's inside the plane. These other controls are controlled by the wheel that he has available. Left, right turn, down, back. So he has total control over the spine. He can increase the throttle. He can increase the airspeed. So he increases the airspeed. I have seen planes that have started out, you turn them into the wind, you lower the flaps to increase the speed. You take and put the nose down so you maintain a constant airspeed. And with the wind blowing against the plane, with all the air resistance of this plane, you look down at the ground and this plane can literally fly backwards. Wow. Now, having done all of this, and I know it's been quick, but as you understand how a plane flies, I have a challenge for you. Take a piece of paper, just like this, just ordinary typing paper, and fold an airplane that will remain in the air the longest. Think you can do it? So, let's have a quick review. What's this right here? What's that called? That's a propeller. How does it work? If you'll look at the end very carefully, you'll see that it is nothing more than a wing. Leading edge, trailing edge, pushing the air over the top, across the bottom. That is going to pull the plane forward. Leading edge of the wing, trailing edge of the wing. How does the wing work? Air flowing over this is going to speed up. It's going to decrease the pressure. Air flowing under here is going to maintain that constant pressure. So that difference is going to pull the plane up. How can we increase the lift or the pulling up of this wing? Well, we can increase the speed of the wing or wind coming over the wing Do that by turning into the wind. Do that by increasing the speed of the prop. Putting the nose down so that we let gravity pull us. Or we can increase the angle of attack so that it has more of a downward component as it comes off the end. Again, that's going to allow the air underneath to push up on it. But can we do that infinitely? Can we do that to where the plane is almost straight up? No. At about 24 degrees, if that's our wing, angle of attack of about like this is going to cause turbulence. The wing is not going to provide lift. The plane is not going to fly. Remember what this is? This is the tail. Again, it has the same profile as this wing. This rudder, remember what it does. As it moves back and forth, it's going to increase the pressure on one side, decrease the pressure on the other, and it's going to pull the plane left or right. Elevators. The elevator is going to come up like you see here, pulling the nose down, or pulling the tail down, raising the nose. Or if we need to come down, we can change this and have this more downward. It's going to pull the tail up. The nose is going to come down. Again, one more time. What three axes does a plane have when it's in the air? What three directions of motion can it pull? Well, we have the pitch, we have the yaw, and we have a roll. Now then, as to the challenge to make a paper airplane, think about what we've talked about here as far as how a plane flies. Think about how you can do something to modify your airplane to increase the flight. Try it and see if you can make other modifications to try. So that's how a plane flies. That's how a propeller works. That's how you can annoy your parents. I look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Steph Keeler. I'm a science teacher here at Sequoyah Mid-High High School. And today I thought we would go over some invertebrate anatomy. Next week or in the near future, I believe some of the other science teachers are going to do some vertebrate anatomy. And so I thought, well, I might as well go ahead and talk about some neat invertebrate species. I did want to jump back to last week's lesson really quickly. One of the questions I got from multiple people was, why would you take the DNA out of a strawberry? Like, what's the purpose behind that? And so you can kind of follow it through, not just for strawberries, but you can take the DNA out of all those eukaryotic cells and then compare it. You can look at it and sequence it. That's basically the idea behind the 23andMe kits that you see advertised on TV. We can extract the DNA from cells and then compare the DNA. What do we have in common? What's different? And then the more common links you have, you can show that that's the ancestry of it. So that was kind of the idea behind why people would extract DNA from a cell. Today with the invertebrate anatomy, I just kind of want to go through a general zoology introduction. The first thing we're going to talk about is just all animals together. Doesn't matter if it's a vertebrate or an invertebrate, but what do all animals have in common? When I do this lesson in zoology class, I typically start by giving all of the students a blank piece of paper, and I ask them, write down 20 animals. And at least 15, if not more, of their 20 animals are all mammals, because that's what we think of automatically as an animal. But there's so much more out there, and that's not even a big part of the animal species. It's just what we think of because that's what we have contact with our cats and our dogs. So there's a whole bunch of different types of animals out there, but the things that they have in common is what links them into that animal group. A lot of zoology is classification. How do we classify them? Are they similar or are they different? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at similarities and differences of adaptations that they have. So when we look at animals, there's a couple different things that they have in common. Most of it's at the cellular level, which is kind of interesting. If you think about it, we're going to say, oh, this is a whole giraffe, but look at its cells and tell me if it's really an animal or if it's a plant. The first thing that they have is that they're called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that have to consume food in order to maintain their metabolism. The opposite of a heterotroph is called an autotroph. An autotroph will usually create its own food most of the time through photosynthesis, but there's also another process called chemosynthesis that they can use. But animals can't do that. They cannot photosynthesize. They don't do chemosynthesis. When they get their own food source, it can be by eating other animals. It could be by eating plants. It can be even parasitically. But all of those go into the fact that they're taking an energy from another organism. The second thing that we talk about with animal species is that they're all multicellular. The prefix multi means many, and so you have to have more than one cell working together. They have specialized jobs. There's skin cells, there's muscle cells, there's all kinds of different materials and tissues that go into making our different organs, and that complexity makes them multicellular. Another thing that you can talk about is the fact that they all need oxygen in order to survive. Be careful when you look at the word oxygen versus air. Sometimes we just confuse that because we're breathing air. We think, oh, we're breathing oxygen, but you're actually breathing a whole bunch of nitrogen and a bunch of other gases that are in there as well. We take out the oxygen using our lungs and exchange it for carbon dioxide, but all animals need to be able to do that. When a fish is in water, he needs to be able to extract that oxygen differently. He extracts it from the dissolved oxygen that's in the water and then also gives off carbon dioxide. So they are breathing the oxygen that's in the water, okay? If you use lungs or gills, it doesn't matter. If you're taking in that oxygen, you can still be considered an animal. So those are the main characteristics that we look at. The other one is that they're eukaryotic. Last week we talked about the difference between a eukaryote and a prokaryote. Eu means true in its literal translation, and karyote is nucleus. So when we talked about taking that nuclear envelope off of the DNA, all animals have to have that nuclear envelope around their DNA. That's what's going to qualify them as an animal. Okay, so when I look at these pictures, and I know they're really hard to see, but there's a couple different pictures here. We have a salamander, we have an alligator, there's a fish here, we have a mammal, and we have a bird. All of these guys are animals. They have all those four characteristics that I just talked about, but they also have a backbone, and that backbone makes them a vertebrate species. And you notice a lot of these are really large. They can range in size a lot. Size is not going to be a qualification of being an animal. You can be really big or you can be really small. But these vertebrate species all have a backbone that protects their spinal cord. in contrast to that, in comparison to that, we're going to look at some different invertebrate species today. So the 4 invertebrates that I put up here are an octopus, earthworm, there's a grasshopper with really brilliant wings down here, and then a crayfish. And when we look at these, they're also animals. They have those 4 characteristics that I mentioned, but they're lacking a backbone, and so we're going to call them invertebrates. They are not vertebrate species. The thing about invertebrates is they range in complexity quite a bit. Okay, there are sponges, which are the simplest animal out there, and some people think, oh, they must be a plant because they don't move. But they can't make their own food. They're heterotrophs. They have to take in food from their environment. All the way up to the echinoderms, like a starfish, or in any of these cases. So the octopus is really, really advanced versus a really simple, like, sea anemone that Nemo lives in, okay? Okay, there's a wide range of complexity here. Okay, so what the main word is I want to talk about today is just adaptations. And I'm going to focus mostly on invertebrates, but adaptations are just characteristics that help animals to either survive or thrive in their environment. Okay, and so here we have a picture of a dromedary camel, and one of the things that you're going to pick out an adaptation that this camel has. What is something that makes it a camel? How do you know that's not a giraffe? How do you know that that's not a whale? Okay, those are the adaptations that it has. So I would notice that it has fur, so it's going to be a mammal. But the main thing I usually notice about the camel is the hump. And there's 2 different types of camels. The dromedary camel is this one. He has 1 hump right there, and that is an adaptation to allow him to survive in really dry climates. Okay, some people have the misconception that it's just filled with water. It's not. It's filled with fat as well. And the health of the camel can sometimes be determined by how much this hump is filled. If it looks like it's kind of bending over a little bit, they may be malnourished, or they may have used some of the resources out of there. But if they go for 3 or 4 days without any nutrition or water, they can still survive because this adaptation allows them to live in a dry environment. It's just something that they have that allows them to thrive where other organisms may not be able to. You're probably not going to see a whole lot of frogs out there because it's too dry. Their skin has to stay moist, and that's their adaptation. They have to stay near a moist environment. Okay. So adaptations for invertebrates specifically, it says allows them to thrive in their environment. And so I just picked one off of the internet. I thought this was kind of interesting. This crab, he has a lot of adaptations, and we're going to compare him to a crayfish here in a little bit. But the one that I picked out says the 5th and back pairs of the legs are used for swimming. And so if you notice, these legs right here are fairly thin, and these guys back here are wider. Okay, it says the legs are often flat, like paddles. Okay, think about the fins of a fish. They're flat. They want to have as much surface area. We talked about how important surface area is last week. The more surface area you have, the more you can do. And so the bigger the fin, like I think of a caudal fin or a tail fin on a fish, it allows it to propel forward. The fins all have a different job, but the flatter it is, the more impact it has on the water as it's moving through there. So this is when they're obviously aquatic, but they're going to use them to paddle through the water. Okay? So adaptations, just what makes it different and why do they have that? So we're going to look at 3 different invertebrates today to compare their adaptations. If I get to all 3, I may only get to 2 today. The first one that I'm going to look at is a squid. I think the squid is probably one of my favorite invertebrates that we dissect through zoology because it has so many unique adaptations. I want to mention really quickly the classification. When we look at different animal species, we're going to classify them through 8 different levels. They're called taxonomic levels. The big one is the kingdom and the domain at the top. The domain is eukarya, which means that they all have a cell with a nucleus inside of it. And then the next one is the animal kingdom, and everything we look at today is going to be in the animal kingdom. Other kingdoms include the plant kingdom, the protists. There's 2 different bacteria kingdoms. And then the one I'm missing, fungus. And there's a fungus kingdom as well. Only going to look at animals today. So again, these would be things that they have in common. And then I'm going to start to break them down and look at how they're different. This is in the next class, or the next classification is called phylum, and it's mollusca. We usually just call them mollusks. Okay? So it says, what characteristics do the mollusks have that put them into this group? The word translation is how I usually go about deciding what they are. Mollusca just means soft-bodied. Well, a whole lot of invertebrates could fit into that. And so we kind of look for other classifications as well. Most mollusks are going to have a shell. Not all, but most will have a shell. And so start thinking about invertebrates, so no backbone, that have a shell. You can't put a turtle in there because if you've ever found a turtle shell out in the pasture somewhere, when you flip it over, there's a backbone that goes right down through the middle of it. So he's a vertebrate species, so we got to get rid of him right away. The invertebrate species that have a shell will be like your snails. The slugs fit in there as well. They're just a snail without a shell. You could put in there clams and oysters and mussel species, but the squid and octopus also fit into this group. They have primitive shells that are actually internal, and I'll try and show you that a little bit today. They're kind of hard to see. Okay, so when I look at this species, I remember soft-bodied, and for me, the squid kind of looks like that. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a squid, and Mr. Berg is going to try and zoom in on this squid as best that he can. Do you want me to move to the front? Would that be easier? I think we'll do that. Okay, and so here's my squid. And this is what I noticed first about the squid. He has two big triangular fins at the top. There's a body right here, and then there's these tentacles and arms that come down. The first thing I ask students to do when they look at these different species is find the top, the bottom, and those are going to be referred to as dorsal and ventral. Okay, and so when I look at this squid on this side, you notice that it's really dark, and he has like this section right here is called the mantle. It comes into a point. That's going to be the dorsal side or the top side, and then I can flip him over, and on the bottom side, let me find my probe really quickly. Sorry, on the bottom side, he has a siphon right here. Okay, this is where he's able to get rid of a lot of different materials, okay? So that's his ventral side. This is ventral, and this is dorsal. But big things that we want to look at instead. So this section right here is the mantle, and what makes these mollusks fit into this group is this mantle typically will create a shell. The thing about the squid shell is that it's inside, okay? When I lift this up or when I open them up, when I do an internal dissection, I cut right here, and there's a pen, it's called. It's a little shell that goes on the inside here. Why on earth would a squid need a little bit of a shell? Well, it's kind of a vestigial structure. They're not using it a whole lot anymore, but it gives them something to contract against. This squid can take this mantle, and you can kind of look at it, well, if you're here you can. This is a balloon shape almost. You can open it up, and he can put a whole bunch of water in here, and that water will give his body some support, but at the top, because he's in the water, he probably wants to have some fins. So these two fins at the top come to a point, but they help him to maneuver in the water, okay? They're steering, not so much propulsion. He can't use them for propelling forward like the tail fin, but he can use them for steering and for balance. The thing I like best about the squid is, if you'll notice, he's got these dark spots right here. And when you get really close to them, they almost look like freckles. Those little freckles are called chromatophores. The prefix chromo means color. And what is unique about the squid and the octopus is that they can change color in less than a second. They can change a lot of colors. It's not just like a chameleon that might just go green and then go back to brown. They can flash different colors in less than a second. What happens is these little individual freckles have a muscle around them, a circular muscle, and when the squid contracts it or expands it, it allows it to change colors. They can use this color change for a couple different when it wants to, or when it's getting ready to have a feeding frenzy. If there's a lot of food around, they get really excited like I do, and they're going to flash these colors, and it lets the other squid know there's food available. And so you'll see them flashing. It almost looks like light coming through the water in different depths, but it's not. It's actually the squid producing these colors. They have 3 different colors of chromatophores, but they can make multiple colors, just like you learned in art class on Tuesday. They can mix colors together and appear to be different colors. The octopus does it even more so for camouflage. I have this really neat video you can look up where an octopus appears to look like a bush on the bottom of the ocean. It's just seaweed kelp, but they call it a bush in the video. And he blends in so well, you cannot see that octopus until he moves. When the photographer gets really close, he flashes and moves on. Okay, so those are the chromatophores. The most people recognize the squid and the octopus for having a siphon. There's a tube on the underside, or the ventral side right here. It doesn't look like much, but this tube is in charge of a lot of materials. Okay, it's just a It's just a big tube. And what happens is they can use it to fill up their siphon or their mantle and fill up with water and then push it out through this opening at the bottom. And the opening at the bottom gives them some jet propulsion to get away from a predator fairly quickly. They are really yummy for a lot of different species in the ocean, and so they'll use that siphon to escape. The other thing that you'll notice, how many arms does an octopus have? Like the cousin here has 8. Octo means 8. My squid actually has 10 little appendages here. Okay, these 10 little appendages, 8 of them are much shorter than the other. There's 2 here that are much longer. The longer ones are called tentacles, and the shorter ones are called arms, and every single one of them has these little suction cups on them. Why would a squid need suction cups? Okay, these little suction cups actually range in size. They're very large the closer you are to the top of the squid's arm or tentacle, and then they get smaller towards the bottom. The poor squid doesn't have thumbs, okay? When I pick up a bag of potato chips, I'm going to grab them and just throw them in my mouth. He's using these suction cups the same way. So where's a squid's mouth? That siphon only lets things go out. Things won't go in through the siphon. The water that goes out of the siphon actually comes in through the mantle here. If you open up all these arms, inside of there is his mouth. And so what he'll do is he'll grab it with his tentacles and then throw it into his mouth. Inside of the mouth, I retracted it earlier, he has a very small beak, okay? Should have used my other pan here. So the beak looks like a little bird beak, if you can see the black points on it here, okay? And it's just like a bird's beak. It doesn't have any teeth. It can tear. So when it captures a fish with those tentacles, it can tear them and put them into their stomach and pass them on down through their esophagus. But the beak is very, very sharp. And I just think it's always so unique. There's no teeth inside of there, but that's how it's going to capture its food. Use the arms and tentacles, push it in through the beak. And then there's some other appendages. On the octopus, there's a really big eye on this guy. It's really difficult to see, but there's an eye here, and there's an eye on the other side. So this is the head region of my squid, and we call him a cephalopod. Cephala means head, and pod means foot. And I usually don't think about my head with my feet, but that's what he is. Here's a head, and here's all his feet, okay? And then this whole other region back here is called his visceral mass. All his organs are inside here. His stomach is in here. His reproductive organs are in here. His gills are in here. So everything else is inside of there. But my favorite part of this squid is definitely all his little chromatophores and watching them flash colors. If you get a chance to get online and see that, that's kind of fun, okay? So those are kind of my characteristics of a squid. All right, the second one that I'm going to look at, and probably the final species that I'll look at today, is the crayfish. Most of you around here know them as crawdads. They have a bunch of different names. I've been told that they're called mud bugs as well. I believe Miss Trammell probably just calls them dinner. So when we go through and we look at the crayfish, what puts him into the crayfish group? Okay, going back to classification again. First of all, he's in the kingdom Animalia. Okay, he has to eat. He has to have a little cell nucleus inside there. He has to take in oxygen. All of these characteristics still apply that we've talked about with animals today. But now he's in phylum Arthropoda. Arthropoda literally means like jointed foot. And so he has to have jointed appendages, and he has these legs here with joints in them. Underneath he has some swimmerettes that look like appendages with legs. These big chelipeds have appendages with joints inside of them, okay? There's 3 characteristics that all arthropods have to have. In addition to being animals, they have to have those jointed appendages, okay? They have to have an exoskeleton. The prefix exo means outside, and skeleton, okay? We just think about the exoskeleton. So I always tell kids if it crunches when you step on it, it's probably an arthropod. And then they have to have a segmented body, okay? And segmentation sometimes is repeating. You see the same thing over and over again. When you look at his abdomen, and I'll show you this here in a second on the real one, this is a repeating segment on his abdomen, but he has 3 body segments, okay? He has a head, he has what's called the thorax or the chest cavity, and he has an abdomen. Do I have those things? Yes, I have a head, a chest, and an abdomen. So I'm also segmented, but I don't have an exoskeleton, so I can't be an arthropod, okay? So other arthropods, what crunches when I step on it that has an exoskeleton? All my insects fit in this group. All my crustaceans fit in this group, and all of my spiders, all the arachnids are going to fit in there as well. So lots of examples. The arthropod group is actually the biggest one. All right, so characteristics of my crawdad or my crayfish. Okay, when we look at the crayfish, hopefully this is a little easier now to see with the blue background. The first thing I usually notice about the crayfish is the big giant pincers on the front. These guys here on the front are called chelipeds, okay? when we look at the chelipeds, what do you think they use those for? We're always talking about adaptations and why do they have it? Okay, not everybody has one, but these chelipeds help them to grasp food. They're pretty much analogous to the suction cups on the tentacles of the squid that we just looked at. Okay, they have the same function, but completely different structure. Okay, the carapace of a crawdad or a crayfish is just this segment right here. Okay, it's kind of a shell. It's pretty hard. Usually you have to work on getting that open in order to eat them, I believe. All right, at the end he has this really long flat tail, and it has 5 different sections to it. The middle section is called the telson. If you've seen a stingray, not in this group, but he also has a telson, so not a characteristic of just our arthropods, this middle section right here, but these are wide and flat. Earlier we looked at that crab, and he had wide, flat legs. Why does he have those? Okay, they're for swimming. It allows them to move pretty quickly through the water. If you've seen them in the water, they may crawl forward with these walking legs right here, which they have 8 of. But if they need to get somewhere in a hurry, they're going to use these uropods and telsons, these flat, large surface areas, in order to move quickly through the water. Okay, with the walking legs here, you can see they're quite large. And what's interesting is if they lose some of these walking legs, actually get them back. Okay, the walking legs on a crayfish, bless you, are mostly exoskeleton material. There's going to be some muscle material in there as well. But if these accidentally come off, when he gets a new exoskeleton, which we'll talk about here in a second, he can actually regain some of those legs back. The thing that's interesting about the exoskeleton, my skeleton is called an endoskeleton. Endo means inside. Exo means outside. That endoskeleton grows with me. So as I get bigger, or as you get bigger, you're going to see your bones get larger only on an x-ray. When this guy gets larger, his exoskeleton cannot grow with him. He has to molt it, which means he sheds it off and actually kind of climbs out of it and becomes very, very fragile for a small period of time until his new exoskeleton hardens. The exoskeleton cannot grow with him. Okay, so what's interesting about the exoskeleton, I always horrify zoology students that don't like spiders with, is if you see dead spiders in the corner, it's probably not a dead spider. It's probably its molt, and you really just have larger spiders now. Sorry if that's horrifying, but I think it's funny. Okay, other structures that you notice with the, yes, sir?
How long does it take that process to happen?
The molting itself, shedding the exoskeleton, can be pretty quick, but the hardening can take days. And so a lot of times your species that are arthropods that exoskeletons are molted on will kind of hide somewhere. They need some water to make their hydraulics kind of work, but they'll hide somewhere because they're very, very vulnerable to the environment or predators, more so than normal. Okay. Antennas and antennules. So also you'll notice with some of these crayfish, use my little probe here, he has 2 sets of what look like antennas coming off of here. He has this one really long set of antennas, and then he has a smaller set right here. These smaller ones are called the antennules, and the larger ones are antenna. And this is really just tactile sense. Although these large chelipeds or pincers are for grabbing food and throwing it in the mouth, they got to detect that it's there first. Okay, so there's a couple ways that they can do that. They can use this large antenna and antennules, or they can use this beady little eye right here, something that's very common in your arthropods, and I cannot think of other organisms that have them. I think it may be unique to the arthropod group, is this big giant eye here is called a compound eye. There's 2 different types of eyes in animals. There's a compound and there's a simple eye. The compound eye has a bunch of lenses in it versus my eye, which is just a simple eye, and it has 1 lens in it and it can focus it. The advantage of this compound eye is it actually increases the vision range that it has, and the ability to make images is completely different than you would see with a simple eye. So those are some of the adaptations that this crayfish has. His exoskeleton helps to protect him. His chelipeds help him to gain food. And then this big tail helps him to swim. The uropods and the telson that are in there help him to swim. Okay? So those are... Yes, sir. Those are the different adaptations that we talked about with invertebrate species. You can look at them in vertebrates as well. So I'm going to skip ahead here and not do the earthworm dissection today. So let's look at some of these really quickly. If you can tell, this is a clownfish, Nemo. living in his house, okay? So what are some adaptations that he has to help him survive and thrive in his environment? Well, we talked about surface area on fins. The bigger his fins are, the quicker he can move. He moves pretty fast, maybe not for long periods of time, but that surface area helps to move him where he needs to go. The other thing that most fish have is a big layer of mucus that helps to protect them. Most of the time it's for friction reduction so they can move through the water faster, but he actually has that mucus layer to protect him from his house. This anemone is able to sting species just like a jellyfish does, except for the clownfish. The clownfish mucus layer protects it from the stinging tentacles. So it actually helps this anemone bring in other fish that it can sting and eat, but it actually protects it as well. Okay, the last one that we're going to look at here, obviously we're from Sequoyah, so we got to talk about the eagle. What are some adaptations that he has in order to survive or thrive in his environment? Extremely keen eyesight, big eyes, big wingspan for soaring, which allows him to hunt for a long period of time, and then the talons at the bottom help him to grasp prey. He can tear prey. I've watched the eagles hunt over at Grand, and they're way up high, and then all of a sudden they have a fish. It's these adaptations that allow them to thrive in the environments that they're in. Guys, I hope that you have a great week, and I will see you back here next week. Thank you.
Awesome.